I stand at the grand hall entrance of the Claiborne Art Museum, the light from the chandeliers bouncing off the polished marble floors, making them look like a frozen, shimmering lake. Flashes from cameras pop and sizzle from every direction, a storm of light that feels both overwhelming and validating. My painting, the one my family mocked me for, the one born from sleepless nights and cold tears, is being unveiled as the centerpiece in their new multi-million-dollar American Women in Art collection. It hangs on the far wall, illuminated by a dedicated spotlight, a universe of color and pain that I bled onto a canvas. Behind me, I hear my sister Jalissa's sharp, incredulous whisper slice through the ambient murmur of the crowd. She's talking to my mother. That's her painting? The words are choked, laced with a confusion so profound it's almost comical. My mom's champagne flute slips from her hand. It doesn't just drop, it seems to leap from her fingers as if jolted by an electric shock. The crystal shatters on the marble with a sound that is both delicate and violent, a sound that cuts through the noise and makes several heads turn. But they don't notice. They're frozen. Their faces are pale, drained of all the smug rosy color they'd had just moments before. They aren't just shocked because my work is featured here, in a place they worship as a temple of culture and class. They are shattered because the curator, a man with a voice like warm honey and a suit worth more than my first car, just stepped up to the microphone, looked directly at me, and said, "Ma'am, we are ready for your introduction. Not Mallory, not the family's little charity case. Ma'am." And they don't yet know the worst of it. They don't know that I don't just have a piece in this exhibit. They don't know that I own it. But this story, this moment of breaking glass and shattered perceptions, actually began 5 years ago, on my 25th birthday. It began at a dinner table that was supposed to represent love and support. It began on the day they kicked me out in front of the entire family and called me a useless dreamer. It's my birthday. My 25th. The air in my childhood home in Westwood, Massachusetts, is thick with the smell of my mother's rosemary roast chicken, a scent that used to mean comfort, but now just feels heavy, suffocating. The dining room is set with the good china, the kind that only comes out for holidays and special occasions. Though this doesn't feel special, it feels like a tribunal. I'm sitting at the long mahogany table, my back straight, my hands clasped in my lap, trying to take up as little space as possible. Across from me, Jalissa's fiancé Derek is holding court. His tie is loosened just so, a signal of casual success. He's showing off his law firm bonus, a number with so many zeros it sounds like a passcode. Another 40,000 just for closing the Henderson account, he says, taking a delicate sip of his wine, barely broke a sweat. My sister Jalissa beams, her hand resting possessively on his arm. She looks at me with an expression that's part pity, part condescension. My twin brothers, Mark and Evan, jump in next. They're 2 years older than me, identical in their ambition and their dismissiveness. They speak in the rapid-fire language of stock portfolios and market fluctuations. The tech bubble's not popping, it's just recalibrating, Mark announces, as if delivering a sermon. We shifted our assets to renewable energy futures, up 12% this quarter alone. You have to be aggressive, Mal, Evan adds, not even looking at me, just directing his words into the general space I occupy. No risk, no reward. The conversation volleys back and forth over my head, a game of financial tennis where I don't even own a racket. I pick at a loose thread on the linen napkin, my stomach twisting into a tight, anxious knot. I can feel it coming, the inevitable turn of the spotlight. Finally it lands. My mother, her face arranged in a mask of pleasant inquiry, turns to me. Her smile doesn't reach her eyes. "And what about you, Mallory? What have you accomplished this year, dear?" The table falls silent. Every eye is on me. Derek smirks into his glass. Jalissa's perfectly plucked eyebrows arch in expectation. I feel my cheeks flush with heat. I clear my throat, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. "I've been working on my art," I say, the words feeling flimsy and inadequate in this room of solid, quantifiable achievements. I sold a few prints online, just small ones. The silence is broken by a short, sharp bark of laughter from my Uncle Horace. My father's brother. He slaps the mahogany table, making the silverware jump. You still doing those little scribbles, kiddo? He booms, his voice dripping with amusement. I thought that was a high school thing. Jalissa rolls her eyes so dramatically I'm surprised she doesn't pull a muscle. Mallory, you're 25, you're almost 30. Isn't it time to get a real life? You can't live in mom and dad's spare room forever, finger painting. It's not finger painting, I mutter, my voice barely a whisper. I can feel the tears pricking at the back of my eyes, a familiar humiliating burn. It's digital work, and some acrylics. But no one is listening. My father, who has been silent until now, steeples his fingers and leans forward. He's the judge, and he's about to deliver the verdict. His voice is calm, devoid of emotion, which makes it all the more brutal. Mallory, he says, his gaze level and unyielding. We love you, but your mother and I are done enabling this hobby. It's not a career, it's a fantasy. He pauses, letting the words sink in, letting them brand me. You have until Christmas to find a real job, with a salary, and benefits. You either do that, or you're out. We're not running a charity here. The finality of it hangs in the air, thicker than the smell of the roast, out. The word echoes in my head. No one defends me. My mother looks down at her plate, suddenly fascinated by her green beans. Jalissa gives a small, satisfied nod. My brothers are already back to talking about stock options. The conversation just moves on, leaving me shipwrecked in the middle of the dining room table. The next 3 months are a blur of quiet dread. I send out resumes for jobs I don't want, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. I go to interviews for administrative assistant positions and feel like an imposter. Every brushstroke in my small room feels like an act of defiance, a ticking clock counting down to my own exile. Christmas Eve arrives, cold and clear. The house is filled with the scent of pine needles and cinnamon, a cruel mockery of warmth and cheer. They don't wait for Christmas morning. They don't even wait for the guests to arrive for the party. They do it right after lunch. My mother stands in the doorway of my room, her arms crossed, her expression firm. Your father meant what he said, Mallory. My dad is behind her, holding 2 empty suitcases. He places them on my bed. He doesn't have to say anything else. I look from his stony face to my mother's averted gaze. I see no love there, only disappointment, an obligation they are finally, happily, shedding. I don't cry. I don't beg. I move with a strange, numb efficiency. I pack my clothes, my few books, and my sketch pad. The worn, dog-eared book that holds every dream they've ever mocked. I slide my portfolio of prints under my arm. It's all I have. As I walk down the stairs, I can hear Jalissa in the living room, laughing on the phone with one of her friends. I pass the dining room, where the table is already being set for that night's feast. It's a ghost of the birthday dinner, another stage for another performance I'm no longer invited to. At the front door, my mother presses a thin envelope into my hand. There's $500 in there, she says, her voice low. Don't say we never gave you anything. Just don't come back until you've made something of yourself. I leave that night with 2 suitcases, a portfolio, my sketch pad, and the $500 that was meant to be a final insult. As I close the door behind me, the cold December air hits my face, and for the first time, it feels like a release. They thought they were kicking me out, but really, they were setting me free. The first night, I slept in my beat-up Honda Civic in the back of a 24-hour grocery store parking lot. The $500 my mother had pressed into my hand felt like a ticking bomb in my coat pocket. Every dollar spent a countdown to absolute zero. The car wasn't just cold, it was a cage of freezing metal that seemed to suck the warmth directly from my bones. I huddled under a thin, donated blanket that smelled faintly of mothballs and someone else's life, my breath misting in the air before me. Sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the car, every distant siren, every headlight that swept across the frosted windows sent a jolt of panic through me. This was it. This was the bottom. For 2 weeks, my world shrank to the confines of that car. By day I'd park at the public library, not just for the warmth but for the illusion of normalcy, surrounded by the quiet hum of people with places to go. I'd sit in a corner, my sketchpad open, but my hands would shake. It was a tremor that started deep in my gut, a physical manifestation of hunger and humiliation. The faces I tried to draw looked gaunt and haunted, their eyes reflecting the fear I saw in my own reflection in the rearview mirror. I lived on peanut butter, spooned directly from the jar, and cheap gas station coffee that was more brown water than anything else. Each day was a battle for survival, and my art, the very thing that had cost me my home, felt like a cruel joke. Finally, the $500 dwindled to less than 50. Desperation has a taste. It's metallic and bitter, like old pennies. It led me to Buster's Diner, a greasy spoon off the highway with a flickering neon sign and windows filmed with years of grime. They were hiring a dishwasher. The interview consisted of the manager, a portly man named Sal, with a permanent scowl, looking me up and down and asking, "You afraid of a little grease?" I shook my head, my pride a distant memory. He grunted, "You start tomorrow, minimum wage, cash at the end of the week." The work was brutal. 8-hour shifts standing in a cloud of steam, my hands plunged into scalding, murky water, scraping hardened egg yolk and dried ketchup off an endless mountain of plates. My back ached constantly. The smell of bleach and old food clung to my clothes, my hair, my skin. I would go back to my car at night, too exhausted to even think, and fall into a dreamless, leaden sleep. But even in that bleak existence, the urge remained. It was a stubborn little flicker of a pilot light in the storm of my life. During my 15-minute breaks, I'd retreat to the back corner of the diner, next to the humming soda machine. I'd take the flimsy paper napkins and a pen I'd found on the floor, and I would draw. I sketched the tired faces of the waitresses, the way the morning light hit the chrome napkin dispensers, the lonely posture of the old man who came in every day for a single cup of black coffee. These napkin sketches were my lifeline, a quiet insistence that I was more than just a dishwasher. I was still an artist, even here. One slow Tuesday afternoon, I left one of my better sketches on a table by accident as I rushed to clear it. It was a drawing of a little girl pressing her face against the window, her breath fogging the glass. A few minutes later, a customer, a man in a crisp business suit, picked it up. I saw him from across the room, my heart seizing in my chest. He looked at it for a moment, then chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. He turned to his companion. "Look at this. Cute." Then he caught my eye. He smiled, a slick, condescending thing. "You should probably stick to the dishes, sweetheart," he said, his voice loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. He crumpled the napkin in his fist and dropped it into a puddle of spilled soda on the table. The laughter from his friend felt like a slap. My face burned with a shame so hot it felt like it could melt my skin. I grabbed the wadded, soggy napkin and fled to the back, my vision blurring. I stumbled into the tiny, windowless break room, a closet-sized space that smelled of stale cigarettes and despair. The door swung shut behind me, plunging me into near darkness, and there, leaning against the grimy wall, I finally broke. The sobs came out in ragged, ugly gasps. I sank to the floor, my body shaking with the force of my grief. Every insult, every look of pity, every moment of failure from the last few months crashed down on me at once. My father's cold ultimatum, Jalissa's sneer, the man's careless, cruel words. They were right, all of them. I was a joke, a failure, a useless dreamer who now washed dishes for a living. My hand closed around my sketchpad, which I'd tucked into my apron. My fingers tightened, my knuckles white. I was going to do it. I was going to rip it in half, tear out every page, and throw it in the dumpster with the rest of the garbage. I was going to destroy the one thing that had brought me all this pain. My fingers bent the thick cardboard cover back, the spine groaning in protest. But then, something stopped me. A voice. It wasn't loud. It was a whisper from the deepest, most resilient part of myself. A part I thought had been starved into silence. Draw. The word was simple, clear. Even if it's all you have, draw. I held the pad, my hands still trembling, the urge to destroy it warring with that quiet command. The man in the suit hadn't been critiquing my art. He was critiquing my station. He saw a dishwasher, so he saw worthless scribbles. He didn't see the lines, the shading, the attempt to capture a fleeting moment of childhood wonder. He saw nothing. And for the first time, I realized his opinion was as worthless as the soggy napkin he'd discarded. My sobs subsided, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I smoothed the cover of my sketchpad. I would not let them win. I would not let their blindness define my vision. I would draw. I would draw on napkins, on receipts, on anything I could find. I would draw through the exhaustion, and the hunger, and the humiliation. It was all I had left. But maybe, just maybe, it was all I ever needed. I wiped my eyes on my sleeve, took a deep, shaky breath that tasted of bleach and determination, and went back to work. A few weeks after my breakdown in the break room, she started coming into the diner. She was an old woman, but the word old felt too simple, too plain for her. She moved with a deliberate, unhurried grace, leaning on a silver-headed cane that looked more like a scepter than a support. She always sat in the same booth, the one in the back corner, and she was always alone. She'd order a cup of tea and a slice of toast, and she would sit for an hour, sometimes two, just watching the chaotic ballet of the diner with eyes that missed nothing. I noticed her watching me, during lulls in the dish piling, when I'd snatch a few moments to sketch on a napkin. I could feel her gaze on me. It wasn't intrusive or judgmental like the businessman's had been. It was curious, intense. It was the gaze of someone who was actually seeing, not just looking. It made me nervous, but it also made me draw with more intention, my lines becoming a little surer, a little bolder. One rainy Tuesday night, the diner was nearly empty. I was sketching the reflection of the neon sign in a puddle on the street outside, trying to capture the way the colors bled into the asphalt. I was so engrossed I didn't hear her approach until she was standing right beside my table. The scent of lavender and old paper reached me first. I looked up, startled. She was standing over me, her silver cane resting beside her. Up close, her face was a roadmap of a long, interesting life, a web of fine lines around piercing blue eyes. She wasn't smiling. "Your lines tell the truth," she said, her voice surprisingly strong, with a crisp, educated accent that felt entirely out of place amidst the clatter of plates and the sizzle of the grill. I just stared at her, my pen frozen above the napkin. "But you don't believe in yourself yet. It shows." In the hesitation, she tapped a finger on a spot where my line wavered. "Right there. You saw it clearly, but you were afraid to commit to it." My mouth opened, but no words came out. I was speechless. Who was this woman? "You're wondering who I am," she said, as if reading my mind. "My name is Eleanor Kavanaugh." She extended a hand. Her grip was firm, her skin cool. The name meant nothing to me at first. I just mumbled my own name, Mallory. "Mallory," she repeated, tasting the name. "An appropriate name for one who has suffered misfortune. But it needn't be your destiny." That night, after my shift, I didn't go straight back to my car. I went to the public library and used one of their computers. I typed Eleanor Kavanaugh into the search bar. The results flooded the screen. My jaw dropped. Eleanor Kavanaugh was not just some random old woman. She was a legend in the Boston art world. For 30 years, she had been the chief curator at the prestigious Boston Museum of Fine Arts. There were articles about her, interviews, photos of her standing next to famous artists. Her gaze just as intense and discerning as it had been in the diner. She had retired 5 years ago, but her name was still synonymous with a sharp, uncompromising eye for genuine talent. And she had been watching me sketch on a napkin. The next night, she was back in her booth. I approached her, my hands clammy, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked you up," I stammered. She gave a slight nod, unsurprised. "I would have been disappointed if you hadn't. Curiosity is the engine of art." She took a sip of her tea. "Your shift ends at 10. Meet me at my loft. I have a proposition for you." She wrote an address on a clean napkin and pushed it across the table. It was in the old warehouse district downtown, an area known for its artist lofts. At 10 o'clock, I stood outside the address she'd given me, a massive converted brick warehouse. My diner uniform felt like a costume of shame. I nearly turned and ran, but the memory of her words, "Your lines tell the truth," pushed me forward. I pressed the buzzer for her apartment. Her loft was breathtaking. It was a vast, open space with soaring ceilings, hardwood floors scarred with paint drips, and enormous windows that looked out over the city lights. Canvases of all sizes were stacked against the walls. The air smelled of turpentine, linseed oil, and old books. It was the most beautiful place I had ever been. It smelled like hope. Eleanor was sitting in a worn leather armchair, a single lamp illuminating her. "Take off your coat, Mallory. Make yourself at home, such as it is." I did, feeling clumsy and out of place. "I have a challenge for you," she said, getting straight to the point. "I want you to paint my portrait." I stared at her. "Me? But I've never done a formal portrait. I sketch." "I'm not asking for a photograph," she countered, her voice sharp. "I'm asking for a painting. But there is one rule, and it is absolute." She leaned forward, her blue eyes pinning me in place. "You will not flatter me. You will not paint the distinguished curator the world expects to see. You will not try to make me look wise or kind or noble. You will show me the real me. The tired, impatient, lonely old woman who sits in a diner because she has nowhere else to go. Can you do that? Can you paint the truth you see?" The challenge hung in the air, terrifying and exhilarating. It was everything I had ever wanted someone to ask of me. Not to be neat, or pretty, or profitable, but to be honest. "Yes," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I can." She nodded, a flicker of something that might have been approval in her eyes. "Good, we'll start tomorrow night." Over the next few weeks, I would finish my shift at the diner, wash the grease from my hands, and walk to her loft. She would sit for me, and I would paint. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. She was a relentless critic. "No, not like that," she'd snap. "Your brushwork is timid. You're caressing the canvas. Attack it. The shadow under the eye is not a smudge of gray, it's a cavern of exhaustion. Show me the weight of it." She would get up, take the brush from my hand, and demonstrate, her own strokes full of a ferocious energy that defied her age. She was tough, she was demanding. She dismantled everything I thought I knew about art and forced me to rebuild it on a foundation of raw, brutal honesty. But through it all, she never ever made me feel small. One night, I was struggling with the texture of her skin, trying to capture its papery thinness. I threw my brush down in frustration. "I can't do this. I'm just a dishwasher who scribbles on napkins." Eleanor stood up and walked over to the canvas. She looked at it for a long moment, then turned to me. Her expression was serious. "You are not a dishwasher," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You are not a scribbler. You are an artist, and it's time you started acting like one." Artist. The word hit me with the force of a physical blow. No one had ever called me that before. Not my parents, not my sister, not my friends. To them, I was a dreamer, a hobbyist, a failure. But to Eleanor Kavanagh, the woman who had shaped the Boston art scene for a generation, I was an artist. In that moment, something inside me shifted, settled, and clicked into place. For the first time in my life, I believed it. The 6 months that followed were a grueling, exhilarating marathon. My life split into two distinct, clashing worlds. By day, I was Mallory the dishwasher, my hands raw from soap and scalding water, my ears ringing with the constant clatter of Buster's diner. I'd serve coffee, mop floors, and smile politely at customers who had no idea about the other life I was leading. The exhaustion was a physical entity, a heavy cloak I wore constantly. I was still sleeping in my car, though I'd found a safer, quieter spot behind a church. The money I made at the diner barely covered gas and food, but it was enough to keep me going. Then, at 10 o'clock each night, I would shed that life like a snakeskin. I'd walk the 12 blocks to the warehouse district, the city air washing the smell of grease away. The moment I stepped into Eleanor's loft, I would become Mallory the artist. The fatigue would fall away, replaced by a thrumming, focused energy. The loft was my sanctuary and my training ground. Eleanor pushed me relentlessly. We moved beyond her portrait. which I worked and reworked until she finally gave a single terse nod of approval. She had me study the masters, not by copying them, but by deconstructing them. See how Rembrandt used darkness, not as an absence of light, but as a character in itself, she'd demand, pointing to a page in a heavy art book. His shadows have substance, yours are still just dark. She taught me about color theory, not as a set of rules, but as a language of emotion. That blue is too passive for the anger you're trying to convey, she'd say, looking at a canvas where I was trying to paint the memory of my father's face at that birthday dinner. It needs more gray. It needs the color of a winter sky before a storm. She made me paint with my non-dominant hand to loosen my style. She had me paint blindfolded to force me to rely on texture and instinct. It was the most rigorous education I could have imagined, and it was all paid for in sweat and dedication. Eleanor knew my work needed to be seen. She didn't believe in waiting for the world to discover you. Talent is useless if it stays in the attic, she'd say bluntly. She started taking me to underground art markets, pop-up galleries held in warehouses and basements, far from the polished floors of the mainstream art world. These were raw, vibrant places, filled with artists who were making work that was too strange, too political, or too honest for the commercial galleries. At first, I was terrified. I would stand by my small collection of canvases, my heart pounding, feeling like an imposter. But Eleanor would stand with me, her presence a silent endorsement. She introduced me to other artists, to collectors who were looking for the next new thing. "This is Mallory Creed," she'd say simply. "Pay attention to her work." Slowly, things started to happen. An older man with a long gray ponytail bought a small painting of mine, a study of a rusted swing set in a deserted playground. I called it Rusted Joy. He paid me $200 in cash. I held the crisp bills in my hand, staring at them. It was the first money I had ever earned from my soul. It felt more real, more valuable than any paycheck I could have ever received from a real job. That first sale was a crack in the dam. A few weeks later, I sold another piece at a different market, then another. The money wasn't much, but it was everything. It was validation. It was proof. With that money, I finally moved out of my car and rented a tiny windowless room in a boarding house. It was barely bigger than a closet, but it had a bed and a door that locked. It was a palace. Eleanor insisted I treat my art as a business. "Passion is the fuel," she told me one night, "but a business plan is the engine. Don't be a cliché, Mallory. Don't be the brilliant artist who dies penniless because she couldn't balance a checkbook." So my education expanded. I spent my mornings before my shift at the library, not just sketching, but using their computers to take free online business courses. I devoured tutorials on branding, marketing, and portfolio building. The language of SEO and social media engagement felt foreign and clinical compared to the language of color and light, but I forced myself to learn it. I built a simple, clean website with a gallery of my work and an online store. I named it creedmodern.com. It was through this fledgling online presence that I met Keenan. He sent me an email through my website's contact form. He was a printmaker who ran a small independent press in a nearby town. "I came across your work via a link from the South End Art Crawl blog," he wrote. "Your use of texture is phenomenal. I particularly love Rusted Joy. If you ever consider doing limited edition prints, I'd be honored to help. I think we could create something really special." We met for coffee. Keenan was my age, with kind eyes, ink stains on his fingers, and an infectious, unpretentious passion for his craft. He talked about paperweights and archival inks with the same reverence Eleanor talked about Rembrandt. He looked at my portfolio not with a critic's eye, but with a collaborator's. He saw the potential. More importantly, he believed in me without any reservation. "This is incredible stuff, Mallory," he said, his voice full of genuine awe. "Seriously. You've got it." We quickly became friends, then partners. He started producing small runs of high-quality prints of my paintings, and we split the profits. His expertise gave my work a new level of professionalism and reach. The momentum was building. With the combined income from the diner, the original canvas sales, and the prints Keenan was helping me sell, I finally had enough to rent a small corner in a shared studio space. It wasn't much, Just 100 square feet partitioned by a thin wall, but it was mine. The first time I unlocked the door and stepped into that space, the smell of my own paints, my own turpentine, I felt a profound sense of arrival. I no longer needed to borrow Eleanor's space or her validation. I had my own. My name, Mallory Creed, began to circulate in quiet, serious circles. Collectors who followed the underground scene started emailing me. A small gallery in Cambridge asked to include one of my pieces in a group show. Throughout all of this, there was a vast, echoing silence from my family. I hadn't spoken to them since the night they kicked me out. Not a single call, not a single text. I saw pictures on Jalissa's social media of family vacations, birthday parties, holidays. Life had gone on without me. On the rare occasion an old high school acquaintance would ask what I was up to, I knew the message that got back to my family was vague. I heard Mallory's working in some diner. I think she's waiting tables somewhere in the city. They would have heard that and nodded, their predictions fulfilled. She was a failure. A charity case. They didn't ask for more details because they didn't want them, and I didn't offer them. Their silence had once been a source of deep, gnawing pain. Now it was a shield. Behind it, in the quiet, I was building my world, one brushstroke, one sail, one small victory at a time. They had no idea who I was becoming. And that was my secret weapon. As my name gained a low-level buzz in the local art scene, a new kind of attention began to find me. It wasn't from the passionate, scruffy collectors at the basement shows anymore. It was from people with money, the kind of people who saw art, not as an expression, but as an asset, the kind of people my family would have been impressed by. The email arrived on a Monday morning. It was from a man named Julian Croft, a name I vaguely recognized from the society pages of a Boston magazine. He introduced himself as a private collector with a passion for emerging artists. He wrote that he had been utterly captivated by my work online, particularly my more atmospheric, somber pieces. He wanted to commission a new painting. He was prepared to offer $50,000. I read the number again, and again. $50,000. The figure shimmered on the screen of my phone, an impossible life-altering sum. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. It could pay off the small loan I'd taken out for studio supplies. It could let me quit my job at the diner. It could buy me security, stability, and time, the three things an artist craves most. It was the real job salary my father had demanded, delivered in a single commission. I wrote back immediately, my hands trembling with excitement, agreeing to a call. We spoke the next day. Julian's voice was smooth and practiced, dripping with charm. He praised my technique, my vision. He made me feel like the most important artist in the world. Then he got to the real point of the call. "The piece I have in mind," he said, his voice lowering conspiratorially, "is a bit of a special project. I own a lovely mid-century landscape by a minor but respected artist, a man named Alistair Finch. He passed away in the 90s. Your style, it's remarkably similar to his early darker period, almost a spiritual succession." I felt a prickle of unease. "Thank you, I think. Here's the thing, Mallory," he continued, the charm sharpening into a business proposition. "The painting would be worth 10 times as much if it were an undiscovered piece from his prime. The provenance is a bit murky, which gives us an opportunity. I want you to paint a companion piece. Same style, same mood. And then, I want you to add his signature. A very subtle, aged forgery. No one would ever know. It would hang in my private collection. It's a victimless act that brings a beautiful, lost work back to life, so to speak." He paused. "And for that small act of artistic collaboration, $50,000 would be yours." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Forgery. He wasn't commissioning a Mallory Creed, he was hiring a criminal. The $50,000, once a shining beacon of hope, now felt dirty, tainted, but God, it was tempting. I pictured myself handing in my notice at Buster's Diner. I pictured a bank account with a comma in it. I pictured the freedom from the constant grinding worry about rent and bills. Who would it really hurt? An artist who was already dead? A rich man who wanted to inflate his own collection? It was a shortcut, a huge, life-changing shortcut. I told him I needed to think about it. My mind was a battlefield. The part of me that remembered sleeping in my car, that remembered the sting of hunger, screamed to take the deal. It was a way out. It was survival. That night, I went to Eleanor's loft. I hadn't been seeing her as much since I got my own studio, but I knew I needed her counsel. I told her the whole story, laying out the offer, the money, the temptation. I half expected her to be pragmatic, to understand the lure of it. She listened without interruption, her face impassive. When I finished, she was silent for a long time, staring out the window at the city lights. Finally, she turned to me, her blue eyes as clear and hard as diamonds. "There are two things an artist has in this world, Mallory," she said, her voice low and steady. "Their hands and their name. You sell your name. You sell your soul. It's that simple." She leaned forward, the leather of her armchair groaning. "That $50,000 feels like a fortune to you now. But I promise you, it will cost you more than you could ever imagine. Every time you look at a real piece of your own work, you'll feel like a fraud. Every compliment will feel like a lie. You take that shortcut, you step onto that path, and you will never, ever forgive yourself. Your art will be poisoned from the root." Her words were stark, uncompromising. They offered no comfort, only a clear, brutal choice. My integrity or my security. The next morning, my hands shaking, I wrote an email to Julian Croft. I told him I was flattered by his interest in my work, but I could not accept the commission as he had described it. I was an artist, not a forger. I signed it, "Sincerely, Mallory Creed." The moment I hit send, I felt a wave of both terror and relief. Croft's reply was swift and venomous. He called me a naive, self-righteous fool who had just thrown away the biggest opportunity of her life. And he didn't stop there. He went online. He found a popular Boston art forum, a place where collectors and gallery owners scouted for new talent, and he wrote a long, scathing post. He didn't mention the forgery, of course. He framed it as a story of a difficult, unprofessional artist. He claimed I had agreed to a commission and then backed out at the last minute, that my work was derivative, and that I was an amateur with an inflated sense of self-worth. The fallout was immediate. An email from the small Cambridge gallery that was planning to show my work arrived the next day. They were postponing the group show indefinitely. Two potential buyers, who had been emailing me about specific pieces, suddenly went silent. Julian Croft had power, and he was using it to punish me. I had chosen my integrity, and the price was my burgeoning career. I sat in my studio, surrounded by my paintings, the silence deafening. I had made the right choice, Eleanor's voice echoing in my head, but it felt like a terrible mistake. The regret was a bitter pill in my throat. That afternoon, Keenan showed up at my studio door with 2 cups of coffee. He'd seen the post. "He's a snake, Mal," he said, setting the coffee down. "Everyone in the scene knows what Croft is like. He does this to anyone who doesn't play his games." "He's ruined me, Keenan," I said, my voice thick. "I've lost everything I was starting to build." Keenan shook his head, his expression firm. "No, he hasn't. He's just tested you, and you passed." He looked around the studio, at the canvases filled with my honest, painful, truthful work. "Artists don't need approval from guys like that. They need courage, and you have it. You just proved it." He then pulled out his phone and showed me the forum thread. Beneath Croft's poison pen post, a few other smaller artists had started to comment. "Sounds like Croft's usual bullying. He tried to get me to touch up a piece once too." A small counter-narrative was beginning to form. My stand had, in a small way, emboldened others. He was right. I had doubled down on who I was. I had refused to sell my name. That night I went online, not to the forums, but to my own website and social media. I wrote a simple post. "My name is Mallory Creed. My work is not for sale to anyone who asks me to compromise my integrity." I didn't mention Croft. I didn't have to. The response was slow at first. Then it grew. My followers, the ones who had found me through the art crawls and Keenan's prints, rallied. My post was shared. People respected the stand. My followers began to grow. Not with big money collectors, but with genuine fans who valued the authenticity Eleanor had taught me to cherish. And then, a week later, an email landed in my inbox that made my heart stop. The subject line was simple: submission inquiry. The sender was the Claiborne Art Museum. They were the biggest, most important contemporary art gallery in the state. They wrote that they were curating a new exhibit and were impressed by the unflinching emotional honesty of my portfolio. They formally requested a submission. I looked at the email, then at the painting I had been working on, a raw, emotional piece about standing your ground. My choice hadn't been a mistake. It had been a crucible. It had burned away the impurities and left behind something strong, something real, something the Claiborne wanted to see. The email from the Claiborne felt like a divine reward for the choice I had made. I poured everything I had into the submission. I chose 3 of my strongest, most personal pieces. The portrait of Eleanor, which I had titled The Unflinching Gaze, a stark, lonely cityscape called Concrete Lullaby, and a newer, more ambitious canvas, a self-portrait of sorts, depicting a young woman standing in a downpour next to 2 suitcases, her face turned up to the sky, her eyes burning with a defiant fire. I called it Baptism by Bruise. I spent a week photographing the pieces, writing my artist's statement, triple-checking every detail of the submission form. Keenan helped me package the digital files perfectly. Sending it off felt like releasing a prayer into the universe. For weeks, I checked my email obsessively, my stomach flipping with a mixture of hope and terror every time a new message appeared. The rejection came on a gray, drizzly Thursday morning. It wasn't a long personal letter. It was a form email, cold and impersonal. Dear applicant, it began. Thank you for your submission to the Claiborne Art Museum. We received an unprecedented number of applications from many talented artists. While we were impressed with the quality of your work, we regret to inform you that your pieces have not been selected for the upcoming exhibition. We wish you the best in your future artistic endeavors. That was it, not been selected. The words were so simple, so clinical, yet they landed like a punch to the gut. I read the email over and over, hoping I had misunderstood, but the message was clear: I wasn't good enough. The hope that had buoyed me for weeks evaporated, leaving a cold, heavy dread in its place. The validation I thought I'd earned had been a mirage. Croft's curse, it seemed, was still working. I closed my laptop and curled up on the threadbare couch in my studio, and for the first time in a long time, I cried. Not the hot, angry tears of frustration, but the deep, ragged sobs of utter defeat. I cried for 2 days. I didn't answer my phone when Keenan called. I didn't go to the diner. I just lay there, the gray light of the city filtering through the grimy studio window, feeling the full weight of my failure. Maybe my family was right all along. Maybe I was just a fool chasing a dream that would never come true. Maybe I should have taken Croft's money. At least then I'd be a fraud with a full stomach and a warm apartment. The universe, it seemed, agreed. On the 3rd day, a letter was slipped under my studio door. It was from my landlord. Due to rising property values in the neighborhood, my rent was being increased by 30%, effective the 1st of the month. I stared at the number. It was impossible. I was barely making ends meet as it was. The small trickle of income from my art had all but dried up after the Croft incident. The diner job alone couldn't cover this. I sat on the floor, the rejection email on my laptop, and the rent increase notice in my hand. This was it, the end of the line. I would lose my studio. I would be back to square one, or worse. The thought of going back to sleeping in my car, of admitting defeat, was a physical pain. I thought, maybe this is the sign. Maybe this is it. It's over. It was Keenan who found me. He'd used the spare key I'd given him to let himself in, his face etched with worry. He found me on the floor, surrounded by the debris of my despair. He didn't say "I told you so," or offer any easy platitudes. He just sat on the floor with me, a silent, steady presence in my storm. And then, his phone rang. He answered it, his voice low. I watched his face change, his brow furrowing, his eyes widening in shock. He hung up and looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Mallory," he said, his voice soft. That was a call from Mass General Hospital. My blood ran cold. It's Eleanor, he said. She passed away in her sleep last night. A heart attack. It was peaceful. The news didn't register at first. It was just a string of words, nonsensical and unreal. Eleanor, gone. It wasn't possible. She was indestructible, a force of nature. I had just seen her last week. We had argued about the use of ochre in my latest piece. She couldn't be gone. The rejection, the rent, all of it vanished. A new, much larger, much darker hole opened up inside me. The architect of my second chance was gone. A few days later, a lawyer contacted me. Eleanor had, to my complete astonishment, named me in her will. She had left me a key and a note, to be delivered by hand. I went to her loft, the place where my new life had begun, and let myself in. The air was still, thick with the scent of turpentine and her lavender perfume. It was exactly as I remembered it, but the energy was gone. It was just a room now, full of things. On her drafting table, there was a single, sealed envelope with my name on it, written in her elegant, spiky handwriting. I opened it with trembling fingers. The note inside was short. Mallory, if you are reading this, it means my time has run out. Do not grieve for me. I have lived a full life on my own terms. What I want you to remember is this. You were never worthless. You were just surrounded by people too blind to see your worth. Their judgment was a reflection of their own limitations, not yours. Do not let their voices be the ones you hear in your head. Hear mine instead. The world needs your truth. Now go and paint it. Yours, Eleanor. Tucked inside the note was a single ornate key. A second, more formal letter from the lawyer explained. Eleanor Kavanagh had no children, no living relatives she cared for. She had left me everything: the loft, her collection of art books, and a modest but stable investment portfolio she had managed carefully for decades. She had left me her legacy. I sank into her worn leather armchair, the note clutched in my hand, tears streaming down my face. These were not tears of defeat. They were tears of grief, of gratitude, of a profound, earth-shattering sense of responsibility. The rejection from the Claiborne didn't matter anymore. The rent increase didn't matter. Eleanor had given me one last gift, a foundation, a fortress. She had believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. She had seen an artist when I saw a failure. She had called me worthy when the world called me worthless. I looked around the magnificent silent loft, not at a place of loss but at a place of new beginnings. I would not let her down. I would not let her legacy be one of quiet retirement. I would take what she gave me and build something that would shake the very foundations of the world that had dismissed us both. I would make her proud. The vow was silent, but it echoed in every corner of the empty room. My false defeat was over. The real work was about to begin. The grief for Eleanor was a vast, quiet ocean, but beneath it, her final words became my new constitution. Their judgment was a reflection of their own limitations, not yours. Armed with her legacy, the loft, the resources, and most importantly, her unwavering belief in me, I stopped thinking about survival and started thinking about building an empire. My first act was to transform her magnificent downtown loft. It was too sacred a space to be just my private studio. It needed to breathe, to be filled with the same kind of defiant, honest energy Eleanor had cultivated in me. I sold off a few of the more conservative blue-chip pieces from her collection, the ones that would have made my father nod in approval, and used the capital to renovate. I painted the brick walls a stark gallery white. I installed professional track lighting. I turned her former sanctuary into a public stage. I called it Creed Collective. It wasn't going to be a traditional gallery that courted established names. It was going to be a rotating exhibition space for outsider artists. For the ones like me, the dishwashers, the self-taught, the ones sketching on napkins and dreaming in secret. It was a home for the artists the mainstream world had deemed too raw, too messy, or not commercially viable. It was a tribute to Eleanor's spirit. Simultaneously, I poured resources into my online presence. I hired a web developer and rebranded my simple website, creedmodern.com became a sleek professional platform, an online hub for my work and the work of the artists featured at the collective. It had a high-end e-commerce backend, a beautifully designed portfolio section, and a blog where I wrote about the importance of authentic, unapologetic art. Keenan was my first and only call. I found him in his print shop, sleeves rolled up, ink on his cheek. "I'm starting something, Keenan," I told him, my voice steady and sure. "Something bigger than just me. And I can't do it alone. I don't want a collaborator anymore. I want a partner, a full-time director of operations for Creed Collective and Creed Modern." I offered him a salary that made his eyes widen, and a stake in the business. He didn't hesitate for a second. He just grinned, wiped his inky hand on his jeans, and shook mine. "When do we start, boss?" he asked. With Keenan handling the logistics, I was free to do what I did best: create and curate. We started shipping my original works and his fine art prints globally. An order came in from London, then Berlin, then Tokyo. Each sale felt like a small tremor, a sign that the ground was shifting. Keenan's meticulous attention to detail meant that every print that left our studio was a work of art in itself, and our reputation for quality grew. Our first show at Creed Collective featured a retired construction worker who made intricate sculptures out of scrap metal and a young single mother who painted these haunting, beautiful portraits on discarded pieces of cardboard. The Boston arts media, initially dismissive, started to take notice. We weren't playing by their rules, we weren't asking for their permission, we were just doing it. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. A writer from Modern Artistry, a chic and influential international magazine, was in Boston doing a story on the established gallery scene. She found it, in her words, stale and predictable. Someone told her to check out the weird little gallery in the warehouse district. She came to our third show, unannounced. She stayed for 2 hours, talking to the artists, talking to me. 2 months later, the article was published. It was a 4-page spread titled, "The Boston Rebellion: How Creed Collective is Giving a Voice to the Voiceless." The writer didn't just praise the gallery, she focused on my story. She told of my beginnings, painting in secret, of Eleanor's mentorship. She called me a rising voice in American realism, with an entrepreneur's mind and a revolutionary's heart. She described my work as possessing a bruising honesty that is both deeply personal and universally resonant. The article was a fire starter. The phone at the gallery started ringing off the hook. My website traffic exploded. But the biggest change came from the commercial world. A major home decor retailer, the kind of store you find in every upscale mall in America, reached out. They wanted to license a series of my prints. Not the raw, angry ones, but my quieter, more accessible cityscapes. Keenan and I debated it. Was this selling out? Was it compromising the raw integrity of the work? I thought of Eleanor's advice. Don't be the brilliant artist who dies penniless. This wasn't forging a signature, this was strategic. This was taking my vision and putting it in front of millions of people who would never step foot in a gallery. This was funding the revolution. We hired a lawyer, negotiated a contract that gave me full artistic control and a generous royalty percentage, and we signed the deal. Suddenly my art was in stores from California to Maine. My name, Mallory Creed, was becoming a brand. And then, about a year after Eleanor's passing, an email arrived. The subject line made my breath catch in my throat. "Regarding your previous submission, the Claiborne Art Museum." It was from the head curator himself, the man whose name had been on my rejection letter. He wrote that he was personally writing to apologize. A junior curator had handled the initial round of submissions for their American Women in Art exhibition and had, in his words, shown a profound lack of vision. He had recently come across my work again through the Modern Artistry article and had visited my website. He was, he wrote, mortified that they had overlooked me. He was particularly interested in one piece from my original submission, the self-portrait, Baptism by Bruise. He said it was one of the most powerful contemporary portraits he had ever seen. He believed it could be the cornerstone of their entire exhibition. He wanted to know if it was still available. And then he named their offer. $2.4 million. I stared at the number, my mind reeling. It wasn't just a life-changing amount of money. It was a symbol. It was the ultimate validation from the very institution that had rejected me, that had left me crying on my studio floor. It was the world catching up to Eleanor's vision. Keenan came and stood behind me, reading the email over my shoulder. He let out a low whistle. "Mal, this is it. This is the mountaintop." But I wasn't looking at the money. I was looking at the opportunity. This was more than a sale. It was a checkmate. A cold, calculated calm settled over me. I knew exactly what I had to do. I typed out my reply. I thanked him for his generous offer. I told him that yes, the painting was available, and I was willing to sell it to the Claiborne. But I had one condition. It was non-negotiable. "I will be present at the official unveiling ceremony," I wrote. "And I require 10 personal invitations to the event, to be used at my discretion." He replied in less than an hour. "Of course, Miss Creed. It would be our honor." The plan clicked into place, each piece as precise and deliberate as a brushstroke on a canvas. The game was set. The lavender envelope arrived on a crisp autumn day, its thick cardstock feeling heavy and important in my hands. It was an invitation to my sister Jalissa's wedding. The script was a swirling, ostentatious gold foil. Inside, tucked alongside the main invitation, was a smaller, separate card, just for me. It was a handwritten note from Jalissa herself. "Mallory," it read, her perfect, loopy handwriting a familiar sight. "We'd love for you to be there on our special day. I've enclosed a dress code suggestion. Something modest and simple would be best. And if people ask what you're up to, maybe just stick to the simple version. No need to get into all the art stuff. It can be so confusing for people. Can't wait to celebrate with you." I read the note twice. A dress code suggestion. Don't talk about art. The simple version. It was a summary of my entire life with them. Be small, be quiet, be palatable. Don't make anyone uncomfortable with your strange, unprofitable dreams. It was a summons for the old Mallory, the one who would have felt a sting of shame and a desperate need to comply. But that Mallory was long gone. I placed the invitation on the corner of my desk in the Creed Collective office, and didn't respond. I didn't RSVP, yes, I didn't RSVP, no. I just let it sit there, a lavender-scented monument to their condescension. A week later, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in years. My mother. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was a masterclass in passive aggression, coated in a thin veneer of maternal warmth. "Mallory, darling, it's your mother," her voice began, syrupy sweet. "We haven't heard from you about Jalissa's wedding. We're all hoping you can make it, but actually, I was calling about something else. Your birthday is coming up, you know. We were thinking, it's been too long. We'd like you to come home for a proper birthday dinner. A family dinner. Everyone will be there. Your father and I, we've heard you're doing well for yourself with that little gallery thing. We're so proud. We'd love to celebrate you." That little gallery thing. The words were meant to diminish, to put my success into a small, manageable box they could understand. "We heard you're doing well." Not a direct question. Never a direct question. Just a vague acknowledgement of rumors they could no longer ignore. But it was the last part that made my plan crystallize into perfect, sharp focus. The birthday dinner, the ultimate olive branch, offered now that I was no longer a liability, but a potential asset to the family image. I called her back that evening. "Mom," I said, my voice even and calm. "Mallory, you got my message." She sounded relieved, genuinely happy. "So, what do you think? A birthday dinner, just like old times." "I'd love to," I said. "What gemi wall." "Oh, wonderful. Your father will be so pleased. Everyone will be. How is Saturday the 12th of November for you?" I glanced at the calendar on my office wall. A huge red circle was drawn around November 12th. It was the night of the Claiborne's grand unveiling ceremony. The night they would present baptism by Bruce to the world. My world. "Saturday the 12th is perfect," I said, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Excellent. It will be a surprise for everyone. We'll see you then, darling. I hung up the phone. The bait was taken. I had my other plans. They thought they were inviting the prodigal daughter home for a quiet family dinner, a chance to absorb my success into their own narrative, a chance to say, "We always believed in her." They were arranging a party to celebrate the version of me they could finally approve of. What they didn't know was that I was arranging a party of my own, and the guest of honor would be the truth. I picked up Julissa's wedding invitation and dropped it into the shredder. There was only one celebration that mattered now. The night of November 12th was cold and clear, the kind of autumn evening where the air feels electric. The Claiborne Art Museum was a beacon of light and activity, black cars lining the curb, photographers' flashes strobing against the grand marble facade. I had sent my family the invitations I'd received from the museum, presenting it as a treat, a special preview of a major exhibit before our family birthday dinner later that evening. I managed to get us tickets to this huge art event. I'd told my mother on the phone. "It's the talk of the town. We can go for an hour or so and then head to the restaurant." They ate it up. The chance to be seen at such a prestigious cultural event was irresistible. They arrived together, a phalanx of suburban royalty. My father in his tailored suit, my mother in a tasteful but expensive dress, Julissa and her fiancé Derek, and my brothers Mark and Evan, all of them exuding an air of bored entitlement. They scanned the crowd, looking for people they knew, for rivals to impress. "Quite the scene, Mallory," my father commented, patting my arm in a gesture that was meant to be paternal but felt possessive. "Good of you to think of us." "Julissa is live streaming," my mother whispered, gesturing with her chin toward my sister, who was holding up her phone, narrating her arrival for her social media followers. "She's telling everyone we're here for a private viewing. Over 20,000 viewers already." My brothers were already working the room, bragging about a recent stock market win to a man who was clearly trying to get away from them. "It's all about predicting the curve," Mark was saying, his voice full of self-importance. They were so wrapped up in their own performance, they barely looked at the art. To them, the museum was just a backdrop, a stage for their own lives. I led them through the initial galleries, past sculptures and installations, deeper into the heart of the museum, toward the new wing where the American Women in Art collection was being unveiled. "So this is the big new exhibit, huh?" Derek said, looking around dismissively. "Hope it's not all depressing feminist stuff." Julissa giggled. "Derek, be nice." We walked into the main exhibition hall. It was a vast cathedral-like space, the walls painted a deep, dramatic charcoal. The room was buzzing with the most influential people in the city, politicians, philanthropists, critics. And on the far wall, dominating the entire space, hung my painting. "Baptism by Bruise" was illuminated by a series of spotlights that made the colors pop with an almost violent intensity. The figure of the girl in the rain, her face raw with defiance, her suitcase a leaden weight at her side, seemed to command the entire room. My family stopped short. They saw the painting first, before they saw the plaque. "Wow," my mother breathed, genuinely impressed. "Now that is powerful." "Look at the detail on that," my father said, squinting. "The artist is certainly talented." Julissa was still looking at her phone. "The lighting in here is amazing." And then, their eyes drifted downwards, to the small polished silver plaque mounted on the wall next to the painting. I watched them as they read it. I saw the exact moment the words registered. "Baptism by Bruise. Oil on canvas. Mallory Creed." The transformation was instantaneous and profound. It was like watching a film run in slow motion. My father, who had been rocking back on his heels with a self-satisfied air, froze completely. The color drained from his face, leaving it a sickly mottled gray. He looked from the plaque to the painting, and then to me, his mouth slightly agape, his eyes wide with a dawning horrified comprehension. My mother let out a small, sharp gasp, a sound like a wounded bird. Her perfectly manicured hand flew to her chest, as if to keep her heart from leaping out. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a terrifying mixture of shock and disbelief. "Mallory?" she whispered, the name a question, an accusation. Jalissa finally looked up from her phone, her eyes flicked from the plaque to my face. The smug smile she always wore vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. That's not possible," she stammered. My brothers stopped their conversation mid-sentence, drawn by the sudden tense silence of our family unit. They stared at the plaque, then at me. For the first time in their lives, they looked utterly speechless. The ambient chatter of the room seemed to fade into a dull roar. The world narrowed to this single tableau of my family's shock. They stood there, rooted to the marble floor, looking like statues of their former selves. And at that perfect, exquisite moment of suspended disbelief, the head curator, Mr. Albright, stepped up to the microphone on the small stage at the front of the room. His warm, resonant voice boomed through the speakers, silencing the crowd. "Good evening, everyone, and welcome," he began. "Welcome to the unveiling of what we believe is a landmark collection. And at the heart of this collection is a singular, breathtaking work by an artist of immense talent and vision." He gestured toward my painting. "And now it is my distinct honor to introduce the visionary behind not only this piece, but the driving force behind the Creed Collective, a true patron of the arts in her own right. Please welcome Miss Mallory Creed." A wave of polite applause rippled through the room. Cameras flashed, their light catching the tears of shock glistening in my mother's eyes. Gasps erupted from the people standing near my family, who knew who they were, who understood the significance of what was happening. My name, the name they had tried to erase. Now, it was being spoken with reverence in the one place they revered above all others. And I, their useless dreamer, was about to take the stage. The walk to the stage felt both impossibly long and incredibly short. Each step on the cool marble floor was deliberate, a reclaiming of ground that had never been mine. The applause was a gentle wave, but to me it sounded like a roar. The lights were warm on my face. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, but the only ones I was aware of were the 6 pairs belonging to my family. They were still frozen, a tableau of disbelief, their faces pale masks of confusion and horror. I reached the podium and looked out at the crowd. In the front row, I saw the mayor. A few seats down was our old family priest, Father Michael, his face a mixture of surprise and dawning pride. There were collectors, critics, society figures, the very people my family had spent their lives trying to impress, and they were all looking at me. I took a deep breath, the microphone cool beneath my fingers. "Thank you, Mr. Albright," I began, my voice steady, clear, and calm. "Thank you all for being here tonight." I paused, letting my gaze sweep over the audience before it settled, just for a moment, on my family. "There's someone I have to thank tonight, who isn't here." Her name was Eleanor Kavanagh. She was a brilliant curator, a fierce mentor, and the first person in my life who ever called me an artist. She found me when I was at my lowest point, sketching on napkins in a diner because my art had cost me my home. A murmur went through the crowd. I saw Father Michael lean forward slightly. "Eleanor taught me that art isn't about making pretty pictures," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "It's about telling the truth. Even when the truth is ugly, even when it's painful." My eyes found my family again. "This painting," I said, gesturing to Baptism by Bruise, "is my truth. This is a painting about a girl who was told her passion was a worthless hobby, a girl who was told to get a real job, or get out. This is a painting about the night she was kicked out of her home, with 2 suitcases and a sketch pad, and left to figure out how to survive." The silence in the room was now absolute. It was heavy, thick with unspoken questions. I could see the dawning realization on the faces of people who knew our family, the whispers starting to ripple outwards. "I slept in my car," I said, the words simple and unadorned. "I washed dishes until my hands were raw. I was hungry, and I was humiliated. I was told my dreams were foolish, and I almost believed it. People who were supposed to love me laughed at me." I saw Jalissa's hand, the one holding her phone, tremble. And then, with a clatter that seemed to echo in the cavernous hall, she dropped it. The screen shattered against the marble floor, but no one looked down. Every eye was on me, or on my family. "But Eleanor," And later, my incredible partner Keenan, they taught me something else. They taught me that worth isn't something other people can give you. It's something you build for yourself, in the dark, when no one is watching. The audience, captivated, erupted into applause. It was genuine now, warm and full. It washed over me, a wave of acceptance that healed old wounds. I watched as my father, snapping out of his stupor, attempted to recover. He put on a weak, watery smile and tried to laugh, a horrible, forced sound. He nudged my mother. "Can you believe her?" he said to the person next to him, his voice loud enough for me to hear over the applause. Such a flair for the dramatic. We always knew she was this talented. We were just giving her a little push, you know. Tough love. The applause died down. The room was quiet again. I turned my head and looked directly at him. The microphone picked up my voice, clear as a bell, amplifying it throughout the entire hall. "You called me a burden," I said, my voice dropping, losing all its warmth, becoming as sharp and cold as ice. "You said you weren't running a charity." I let the words hang in the air, a public indictment. I saw him flinch, his pathetic smile dissolving. "Well, I have some news for you. That little gallery thing you heard about? Creed Collective? It turned a 7-figure profit last year." A collective gasp went through the room. "And you're right," I continued, my gaze unwavering, pinning him where he stood. "I did get a real job. I'm a CEO. And since you're all so interested in financial success, I'll share one more piece of news. As of last Tuesday, with the proceeds from the sale of this painting to the Claiborne, I finalized the purchase of a controlling interest in the downtown commercial building where your law firm, Derek, is a tenant." I shifted my gaze to my sister's fiancé, who looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. "So I guess you could say that tonight, I bought the entire floor right out from under your feet. Consider it a little tough love." The shock in the room was palpable. It was a nuclear bomb detonated in the middle of a cocktail party. My mother said nothing. She didn't move. She just stared at me, her face a blank canvas of utter and complete defeat. Her world, her carefully constructed reality of success and status, had just been publicly dismantled by the daughter she had thrown away. My success wasn't just something they couldn't mock, it was something they couldn't comprehend, and it was undeniable. The aftermath of the unveiling was a blur of polite congratulations and furtive, pitying glances toward my family. They were trapped, surrounded by their peers, with nowhere to hide from the fallout of my speech. They tried, of course. They attempted to save face with the desperation of drowning swimmers. After I left the stage, my father was the first to approach me, his face a grotesque mask of forced pride. "Mallory, that was quite a performance," he boomed, trying to clap me on the back as if we were co-conspirators in a clever joke. "We are just so proud. I mean, buying the building, that's my girl, always thinking like a shark." I simply looked at him, my expression unreadable. I didn't smile. I didn't say a word. I just held his gaze until his own faltered, his bravado crumbling under the weight of my silence. He shuffled away, defeated. Jalissa came next, her fiancé Derek trailing behind her like a shadow. Her face was blotchy, her eyes red. "How could you do that, Mallory?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "In front of everyone? You tried to humiliate us." "Tried?" I replied, my voice quiet. "No, I just told the truth. Your humiliation is your own creation." I looked past her to Derek, who was avoiding my eyes. "Don't worry about your lease," I said coolly. "I'm a professional. I don't mix business with family." The word felt foreign on my tongue. They wanted to reconnect. In the days that followed, the calls and texts flooded in. My mother called, crying, talking about misunderstandings and how much she missed her daughter. My father sent a long, rambling email about how his methods had been harsh, but had ultimately forged me into the success I was today, as if he were taking credit for the fire he had set. They invited me to dinner, to brunch, to the wedding. They wanted to absorb me back into the fold, to paste over the cracks in the family portrait with my newfound wealth and prestige. But I didn't go back. I didn't answer the calls. I didn't reply to the texts. The door they had closed on me that Christmas Eve remained closed, only this time, I was the one holding the key. My focus was elsewhere. The first thing I did was establish the Eleanor Kavanagh Scholarship Fund, endowing it with a significant portion of the money from the sale of Baptism by Bruise. It would provide full-ride scholarships and studio grants to promising female artists from low-income backgrounds, the girls who were like I had been, filled with talent but lacking resources and belief. My art, I realized, was no longer about revenge. The public reckoning at the Claiborne had lanced that wound. Now it had to be about something more. It had to be about healing, about building something positive from the pain. With Keenan by my side, we expanded our vision. We took over the entire floor of the warehouse building that housed Creed Collective and launched Creed Studios, a state-of-the-art mentorship space. We offered workshops on everything from oil painting techniques to navigating the business of art, all taught by successful artists who had been overlooked by the mainstream. It became a vibrant hub, a place of community and empowerment, a testament to Eleanor's true legacy. A few months later, I agreed to an interview with a major art podcast. The host, a woman with a gentle but probing style, asked me all about my journey, the gallery, the foundation. At the end of the interview, she paused. "Mallory," she said, "it's an incredible story of triumph. But I have to ask, after all this, what do you say to the people, the family, the critics, the voices from your past, who called you worthless?" I thought for a moment, the word hanging in the air. Worthless. It felt like a name from a past life, a label affixed to a person who no longer existed. A slow smile spread across my face. "I don't say anything to them," I replied, "because their opinion was never about me, it was about them. Worthless is what they called me. Artist is who I've always been." I am sitting in my new studio, the one that takes up the entire top floor of the Creed Studios building. The late afternoon sun streams in through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long golden rectangles across the polished concrete floor. The light is clear and bright, nothing like the grimy gray light that used to filter into my first shared space. The air smells of fresh canvas, linseed oil, and possibility. Music is playing low from a speaker in the corner. A quiet, instrumental piece that feels like peace. My hands are stained with cadmium yellow and ultramarine blue. It's a familiar, comforting feeling. For years, the paint on my hands felt like a mark of defiance, a secret identity I had to hide. Now, it just feels like me. In front of me, resting on a large easel, is a new canvas. It's blank, a pristine, intimidating, and exhilarating white square. My next chapter. My next truth. For the past 5 years, every painting I created was born from a place of pain, of struggle, of a desperate need to prove myself. My art was my weapon, my shield, my testimony. I painted the loneliness of my car. I painted the exhaustion of the diner. I painted the humiliation of my family's scorn. I painted the defiant fire of survival. But today, as I look at the blank canvas, I feel something new. The anger has subsided, leaving a quiet strength in its place. The hurt has scarred over, no longer an open wound. For the first time in years, I don't feel the urge to paint from pain. I feel the desire to paint from peace. I want to paint the way this light falls across the floor. I want to paint the quiet joy on the face of a young artist in the studio below. I want to paint the feeling of a world I built, not one I had to fight against. I learned something on this long, hard road. I learned it in the cold of my car, in the heat of the diner kitchen, in the sacred quiet of Eleanor's loft, and under the glare of the museum spotlights. People can't tell you who you are. They can give you labels. They can put you in boxes. They can call you a dreamer, a hobbyist, a failure, a burden. They can project their own fears and limitations onto you, until you can barely see yourself. But they can't define your soul. Only you can do that. Your worth is not a public consensus. It is a private conviction. So to anyone out there right now, feeling dismissed, mocked, or made to feel small for your passion, hear me. To anyone who has been told their dream is impractical, their art is useless, their voice is unimportant, listen, let them talk. Let them laugh. Let them underestimate you. Don't waste your energy fighting them with words. Don't try to make them see. They can't. Their vision is limited. Instead, go be quiet. Go into your room, your garage, your studio, your notebook, and build. Build your skill. Build your confidence. Build your empire in the dark. Let the silence carry your thunder. Let your work be your argument. One day, when you are ready, you will unveil what you have built, and your canvas, your creation, your life's work will speak for you, and it will be louder, and truer, and more powerful than their noise ever was. Don't let anyone decide your worth, especially not the people who never saw your light to begin with. Have you ever been called useless or a failure for following your passion? Let me know in the comments. I read every one. If Mallory's story inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Until next time, believe in your vision, even if no one else does.